happy to answer questions and share whatever anybody wants to hear about.
Yeah, definitely. We'll just wait for a few people to jump on.
Okay.
I see we have a couple joining us. And, and I've never been on, I've actually only been on one or two of these live sessions that started right on the dot.
Okay.
So people are usually hanging out waiting for a notification. But I see we have 6 people here joining us. And please in the comments, say hi, see who's here. Happy Friday, everybody. And I know the snowstorm has definitely impacted a lot of people. Hi, Julia. You're in Vermont. Yeah, you got slammed. I was talking with Susan Garrett. She was in a blizzard in Ontario. Hi, Libby. And I also talked with someone in Wisconsin yesterday. And I guess they were getting what we got today.
Yeah, they were slammed in the Midwest. Yeah. I think everybody's really looking forward to spring.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Deb's from Michigan. Well, great.
Cold.
16 people here. So welcome, everyone, to another one of the Healthy Dog Expo Facebook Lives. Today, my guest is Wendy Shankin Cohen of Dr. Harvey's. And we're going to be talking about fresh food feeding and some of the challenges companies face and what's new and exciting in the field. So welcome, Wendy.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
I'm so happy you could join us, and you're going to be joining us at the expo.
I am. Actually, I won't be there, unfortunately, but my team will be there, and we will be very well represented.
Excellent. And she sent the most amazing box of goodies for the raffle basket, and you will also be getting a surprise from Dr. Harvey's in your gift bags. So, well represented, as you said.
Well, we're very excited about the expo. We think it's a wonderful thing, and we've been before, and the amount of information that gets shared during those couple of days is invaluable for pet parents and for professionals as well.
Yeah, we have a fair number of dog professionals coming in the various walks of dog professionals. But tell me, how long have you guys been making fresh food?
That's a very personal question. Since I was 3. No, actually, the company has been around for over 30 years now. And I'm still quite involved, but now my sons, who were born into it, actually help me run the company. So it's a real family business, and we've been doing it for a very long time. And we're proud to have been a pioneer in this field. When we started out, people looked at us like we were completely crazy. What do you mean you're not going to feed dog food? What do you mean I'm supposed to cook for my dog? So things have really, really changed over the 30 years that we've been doing this. There's still a tremendous amount of pushback from conventional veterinarians and from commercial pet food corners, but certainly the acceptance has increased tremendously. And basically pet parents have been the voice. It's, they've seen the difference in their pets, and that has traveled. And of course, social media has helped everyone to share that information with each other. And, the proof is in the pudding. So we're happy to have been there when it started. Dr. Harvey was really a pioneer, started out really just with a recipe, and he would teach people how to prepare food for their dogs, and really believed in staying away from any kind of commercial pet food, and certainly from any kind of kibble.
Right.
And taught people that if you feed your animals fresh, just like if you feed yourselves fresh, you're going to have a healthier animal. Always was against the use of preservatives and any kind of chemical additives. And it was actually when freeze drying became viable as a way to preserve meat, that we decided that we could actually make a product from this recipe. But that's how it started. It started with a recipe that he shared when he lectured, and he shared with his patients when he was in practice in Manhattan. And that was the beginning. So that's over 30 years ago. And since then, now we make over 45 different healthy products for animals, and try very hard to get the word out about the benefits of feeding fresh every day.
Yeah, it's so much better when I look at your product and rehydrate it. I can tell what it is, and I think of the people who are feeding kibble, and it's brown nuggets or brown mush when it gets if they add water. How do you know what's in there? I can look at yours and say that's a carrot, no, that's a pea, that's green peppers, and it just seems so obvious. Yet my profession is clinging to the brown nuggets. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, it is for us as well. And it is for pet parents too, because very often people will find our foods when they're doing a Google search, or they've had an issue, a health issue with their pet, and the dog gets better.
Mm-hmm.
And they go to the vet and say, well, I've been feeding Dr. Harvey's. And the vet says, oh, you can't feed that. That's not complete. You need to feed this prescription diet.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's very frustrating. Then they'll come back to us. Of course, we don't like to go against what their veterinarian tells them.
Right.
That's a tough position that we're in, but we know why isn't the proof in the pudding? If the dog has gotten better,
Right,
and you see the improvement, everything from a dog who has itching, constant, and you switch them to a raw or, a fresh food diet, and the dog improves and the itching goes away, and they tell their vet, and the vet says, no, 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 you need to be on this prescription food.
Yeah, this super processed crap.
Yeah,
we can call it what it is here because we're all like-minded. And
you said it, I didn't.
I did. And the one thing I always say is I am not slamming my colleagues, my conventional colleagues. Our experiences have been different and have led us down different paths. We're each doing what we believe is in the best interest of the patient, and our opinions just differ. And I leave it at that. But come over to the dark side, or away from the dark side, people. And when I say fresh food, I include freeze-dried, I include dehydrated. Anything that isn't cooked to death and run through an extruder falls into the fresh food category for me.
And it is the cooking and the extruder, but there's also the additives, what they put on top of it, the palatants. That the taste back in, because the dog wouldn't eat it if it didn't have some kind of taste. And so they add that in at the end, and it's the whole process is really, I'm sure you've heard this analogy, but we always say, would you feed your child pretzels 3 times a day for their entire life and expect your child to be healthy? And yet pet parents are told, feed this brown cookie to your dog every single day, every meal, never give them anything fresh, never give them anything it's interesting because, and I know that many years ago when dogs were, when there wasn't a pet food industry, dogs were fed scraps from the table, and they were infinitely more healthy than they are today eating kibble. And we still hear every day, oh, I never feed my dog any people food. And we say, why not? Why wouldn't you feed some real food?
Yeah.
And to see how a dog thrives when it's switched from kibble to real food is, it's an extraordinary and wonderful thing to watch. And pet parents are often so grateful to have that light bulb go off and see the difference in their pet.
And just to see the eagerness with which a dog approaches fresh food of any type. A friend of mine used to have a daycare and occasionally boarded dogs that were daycare clients, and they would be kibble dogs. And she'd be feeding her dogs a fresh food diet and walking past the crate of the dog that had kibble that would put their head up out of the kibble and want that. And of course, she did usually give at least something because it just seemed cruel to tease them that way.
It is cruel. It is cruel. And, the funny, we get lovely, lovely emails, hundreds of them every day. But people will say, my dog is really picky. I don't think my dog is going to eat this.
Oh, gosh.
And then they write and they go, I can't believe he ate his whole bowl. And, because dogs are very smart. And to see that difference, to see how a dog is excited about their meal, as opposed to the kibble is down there and they pick at it and, don't eat it. So yeah, most dogs really love when they're fed fresh food.
Yeah. Sandra has a question that I hope you can answer for her. Let's see if I can show you that.
When measuring the protein, do I weigh it raw or cooked? Always weigh it raw. And if you are going to cook it, which is fine,
Sure.
we really recommend cooking it very, very lightly. So just a little bit of a saute. Don't cook it till it's completely brown.
Yeah, I always say leave a little pink on the inside, even with poultry.
Yeah,
If you're worried about bacteria, remember those bacteria are largely on the outside. So you will have killed the little buggers and still retain some of the good enzymes and everything that's in the fresh meat.
absolutely. Absolutely. And that's often that's how people get to feeding raw. They'll cook it less and less and less, and eventually feel comfortable with giving raw.
Yeah.
You know, younger dogs usually don't have any issue with making the transition.
And there might be a health condition or something where you do feel better cooking it. You're still doing 1,000 times better than kibble.
Without a question.
Libby wants a comparison of the Paradigm versus the raw Vibrance formulas.
Sure. So Paradigm was created to be a base for a ketogenic diet. And all of the vegetables in Paradigm are extremely low on the glycemic index. And it's really meant to be as low as possible. So we recommend Paradigm for dogs that are struggling with cancer, for diabetic dogs, any dog that really needs a very low carb diet. Raw Vibrance was really meant to be a base for people who wanted to feed raw, although we have people that use raw Vibrance and still lightly saute the meat. And it has additional superfoods in it that can enhance a raw diet. But it's actually a good comparison. We find that dogs, if they like the Paradigm, that's great. If they don't like Paradigm, they may like raw Vibrance. There are some things in raw Vibrance that are a little higher on the glycemic index. So it's not quite as carb low. So if you're looking for a super low carb diet, we would recommend Paradigm, and raw Vibrance would be the second choice.
Okay, great. And I notice as I just hide Libby's comment, you're one of the few companies that produces what I call a base mix, meaning you add the protein, that recommends adding fat to it. And I am so happy, because I believe a lot of dogs don't do well on dehydrated or freeze-dried diets because they are low fat. How did you come to doing that, and what fats do you prefer?
So adding the fats has always been part of our recommendation, even before we had products, when we just had a recipe, because it's essential. They're called essential fatty acids because they're essential.
Mm-hmm.
And we also recommend rotating those proteins. So I think at least some of the time it should be fish oil. And we like the small fish oil, and we like salmon oil when it's well caught, and krill. We're big fans of krill. But it can be olive oil, as long as it's not the polyunsaturated fats. The monounsaturated fats are all really good. It can be olive oil occasionally, coconut oil for sure. And we do recommend rotating it. So 1 week maybe fish oil, and 1 week maybe coconut oil. And it's really important for heart health. It's very important for skin and coat. For every metabolic function in the body, you're required to have these fats. So because the foods themselves are very low in fat, and the freeze-dried meat, and most people do feed a lower fat, which we don't particularly recommend. If you're buying meat to add to the base mixes, we say get the less expensive ones, the ones that have more fat, because actually the saturated fats that are in meat are actually good for dogs. They may or may not be good for humans. That's up for debate, but they certainly are good for dogs.
Yeah. And I don't know why the other companies don't get on board with it, but everybody chooses their own path.
Yeah. I mean, I think people want to make it as uncomplicated as possible.
True.
And we are asking, it's a big ask to ask people to go from ripping open a bag to opening a can, to, okay, now you have to mix this base mix. You have to go and purchase meat. Now you have to add oil. So it sounds very complicated, even though I'm sure many of the people who are listening who have used our products know it's actually really very simple once you do it. It's a big ask. It's a big transition for a lot of people. So in order to make it simple, 2 steps is easier than 3 steps.
Sure.
But I think that people see the improvement when they add the oil to their dog's diet. They see the itching stop, and they see the flaking go away, and they see their coats super shiny, and they get less joint pain, and their hearts are healthier. I mean, there's infinite number of reasons to add the oil, but I do think it's a question of making it simple for people.
Yeah, it is an extra step, and I have had owners tell me that they can't have the food sitting on the counter for 5 minutes rehydrating because their dog is going bonkers. And I thought, what a great recommendation that the dog wants their meal and enjoys their food. And what a great time for your dog to go outside or be in a crate or do something else and, have a training moment. So I just lost this question. I really liked it. Debbie wants to know, and I want to talk a little bit about sourcing of your ingredients, and this is a great lead into that. Are your non-organic vegetables ever tested for glyphosate?
Yes.
Source
yeah. All of our vegetables are non-GMO, and everything is tested before we get it. We test it. It's tested by the vendor. It's tested when we get it. We are extremely vigilant about all of the ingredients that we use. And of course, people ask us, why don't we use all organic vegetables? Obviously, it would be our choice to use only organic vegetables if A, we were able to source them regularly, or B, it was affordable. So someday we hope that organic vegetables will be more affordable in the dehydrated form, which is what we use primarily. And at that point, we would be more than happy to make that switch. But with our products, if everything was organic, the price would be so exorbitant that we would cut out a lot of people that we feel are benefiting from the vegetables we are using, which are all human grade. Mm-hmm. And, we always believe there's good, better, and best.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to do good, and sometimes you can do better, and then sometimes you can do best. And so, for example, all of our grains are organic, mm-hmm. Because we think that's critical. And some of our vegetables are organic. And, as things move forward, we hope in the future that we'll be able to move more towards organic. And we certainly recommend organic and pastured meats if that's something you can do. But honestly, if you can't afford that, we are just, again, big into whatever you can do that works with your budget. Is a big step forward, just as you mentioned. When you move away from commercial pet food and kibble into feeding fresh, you've already made a tremendous improvement in your dog's health and well-being.
Absolutely. And there is no shame whatsoever in feeding food, grocery store quality meats. It is still human quality.
Absolutely.
You're still miles ahead of the kibble-fed dog. And, not everybody can do it for themselves, for their dogs. So absolutely 200% on board with what you said. There was a question about raw Vibrance, all life stages formulation versus just adult maintenance. Are your foods suitable for puppies, or what modifications?
So we do not recommend raw Vibrance for puppies based on AAFCO recommendations. However, you certainly can take raw Vibrance and make it appropriate for a 6-month-old puppy. We do recommend adding either cottage cheese or yogurt. The requirements for puppies, according to AFCO, the mineral and calcium requirements are so high that as far as putting it on the bag, we are much safer by just saying that it's for adult dogs. But clearly you can make raw Vibrance, which is basically a vegetable mix, appropriate for a puppy.
Perfect. Perfect. So what are when you source, are you sourcing US based? Do you use some internationally grown vegetables?
We really don't use anything international except for in our bird foods.
Mhm.
Some of the fruits come from Turkey, like apricots we source in Turkey. But all of our vegetables and grains are all U.S. grown and U.S. sourced.
Nice, nice. And this I found fascinating because in the raw feeding community, there is this big push for organ meat feeding. Have you looked at how your foods stack up if someone's adding a lot of organ meat?
We have considered that, and we certainly tell people that if they want to add some organ meat when they're using our food as a base mix, and many of our raw feeders just do that as a matter of course. We're certainly in favor of that. We do not add organ meat into our complete foods, but again, we think it's great if you want to add it. Dr. Harvey has an issue with liver, and so and he, no matter what we have talked about with that, I mean, I think he would be okay with organic pasture raised, but he feels very strongly that liver is not a great organ meat to use. But recently we came out with chicken heart treat, and they're huge, huge, big. Well, my dog is just crazy about them, and people just love them. Certainly, it never hurts. You know, if a dog eats a carcass, they eat the meat and the muscle meat as well as the organ meat. Actually, muscle meat is way more expensive than the organ meat, so we don't do it as a cost saving measure. We just feel like people, because our base mixes allow for people to mix and match, we think it's a great thing, absolutely, to add organ meat to Tom.
I have to say, I'm in partial agreement with Dr. Harvey about liver. The quality of it, if you're going to use it, is so important. And I've been working a bit with Steve Brown, as many of you know, looking at the mineral content of various types of liver from various species, and the difference in zinc and copper in liver from, we'll call them factory farm, but feedlot cattle versus free range versus bison. It's striking. It's sometimes a factor of 3 or 4 difference. And believe me, the feedlot ones are not the ones you want to feed.
Yeah.
So I would rather not feed organ meat if I didn't have a really clean source.
Yeah. So many of our customers, raise their own animals. They have particularly people that live in the Midwest, they have sources. I always say, go to your butcher and ask for trim and leftovers. Perfectly fine to feed your dog. They sometimes give it to you for free. It's stuff that they're going to throw away, and it's great. It's healthy and it's good for your dog.
Yeah, without a doubt. And a lot of people around here, will have deer season and
absolutely
throw the organs away. Nobody wants a deer heart.
Right.
But there's nothing wrong with it for your dog.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great source.
And butcher's trim. Yeah. It might be a little fatty, but you can account for that. Someone was asking earlier about how important it was to measure when using your products compared to and weigh or by scoop compared to just eyeballing it.
So that's a great question. Obviously we have very exact feeding guidelines, but we also believe in balance over time, and that not every meal has to be it's funny because we often talk about how we deal with our own meals. We don't measure every bit of magnesium and phosphorus and every single mineral within our own food, but we tend to think about it that way when we're feeding our animals. And I think people can relax a little bit, actually. Um, what we recommend within that scope, this many scoops and this much meat and this much water, it's really a guideline. It's a recipe, not a formula. And although we feel if you feed the way we recommend, we wouldn't want you to deviate too much. But after a while, and you get very good at this, you can certainly eyeball it.
Sure. And, our grandmothers who worked in the kitchen, every day, they didn't measure their flour. They knew how it looked in the bowl. So you do become practiced. I do want to address one quick thing.
Sure.
Sandra thought you had to feed organs if feeding raw. Sandra, a dog can eat raw and never eat organs and live a vital, healthy, long life. Those nutrients can come from other sources. Don't fall for the social media blast that you must have 3 secreting organs in every meal or you're not doing it right. Many paths up the mountain. So,
totally true.
My soapbox for today. This question on eggshell has come up several times, and maybe we can talk about calcium sources and what your guys' philosophy and experience has been.
So we do use eggshell in several of our formulas, and we think it's a great source of calcium, and it's just great for dogs. We also use eggshell membrane, which is an extremely expensive ingredient, but I'm a big believer in the benefits of eggshell membrane for joint health, as well as other metabolic functions in the body. And even though it's expensive, it is in raw Vibrance, and we think it's a very, very interesting ingredient. That is the tiny little membrane that's inside the egg. Never, ever throw it away. It's good for you. It's good for your dog. And we think eggshell is a great source of calcium.
Do you also use any bone meal or any bone origin?
We do. We do use bone meal and bone broth. In many of our formulas, yes.
Excellent. Oh gosh, here it comes. You ready for this one?
Maybe.
Maybe. This is a potential soapbox issue.
Yeah. So I think this is a great question, and I'm happy to speak to it, especially since I'm a Doberman mom, and
right.
DCM is a huge issue in the breed. So I honestly do not believe that DCM has anything to do with grain-free food. I think that dogs that are prone to have DCM, we need to make sure that they're getting a very good source of taurine. Taurine comes from meat. So it's very important that these dogs, all dogs, have a really good meat source. The study that was done that showed that grain-free foods led to DCM issues and heart issues in certain dogs, I think was a very flawed study. First of all, it was only done on a very few dogs, not enough of a random group to get any real data that I think should have been, spread by, and it's spread by like wildfire. Wildfire, yeah. So we make both dog foods with grain, and we make dog foods without grain. So grain-free became a trend, but what regular commercial pet food companies needed to do was to add protein using a grain-free source. And unfortunately, they went to certain fillers like pea protein. And that took up, it added to the protein, their total protein, so they could say, yes, we have 22% protein or 24% protein. But it also cut back on the amount of meat that they had to add. Therefore, the taurine amount became less. So honestly, I think it's been proven, and listened to a lot of experts on this and read lots of studies, it didn't have anything to do with the grain-free, but it had to do with using legumes or pea protein to add. Pea protein is something we have never used. But the confusion is so great. We actually add whole freeze-dried peas to Canine Health, which is our food with grain. And people are terrified of having anything that has peas in it. It's not peas. It's not whole peas.
Mhm.
It's pea protein. It's the diffractionated protein that comes from the breakdown of peas that they use to up the protein amount. I hope that's not too technical or confusing.
No, that's perfect. And I 200% agree with you. And that was some of the sloppiest science put out there. All of those dogs, what they were fed was totally under control of the owners. And how many owners stuck purely to one particular food? Beyond that, when it first came out with the pea protein isolates and all the other legume source proteins, I got on the phone to several kibble companies and I asked them, how much of your protein comes from meat? And the universal answer I got from those who could answer it was 25%. So that was 75% plant protein, 25% meat protein. Of course, those foods were taurine deficient. And that's not even accounting for any nutritional interference from what's the lectins in the legumes.
Right.
So you could take those quote unquote grain-free diets and literally put in a chicken thigh and correct your problems. But people don't do that.
I mean, the sad part of that report and what it's done is confused the pet parents who thought they were doing the right thing by feeding a grain-free diet. And really, it's so important that the meat source, which is why we make base mixes, because we want the meat to be a fresh meat source and we want it to be the first ingredient.
Yes, truly the first ingredient. And there are companies out there that take a meat protein powder and reconstitute it with water. And by doing so, they can make chicken, for example, be the first ingredient, when actually it's not chicken, it's meat powder and water. And once the water's gone, it's lower down in the ingredient list anyway.
Yeah.
But by identifying those foods as grain-free instead of pulse containing or something like that, they created such confusion. And
that's really the sad part. You're trying to get people to do better with their pet's diet, and these reports come out, and everybody. It's kind of like I happened to see Dr. Karen Becker had a thing on Facebook today about garlic.
Yeah.
So we add garlic to most of our supplements because garlic is an amazing thing.
Sure.
It's antibacterial, it's antifungal, it's antiviral. It's great. In small amounts added to a supplement, it's actually healthy. But for years, 30 years now, we've heard, garlic kills dogs. Garlic is poisonous. And Dr. Becker today had an article about how, you could feed your dog tons of garlic and nothing would happen. So sometimes a little bit of knowledge is very, very dangerous. And unfortunately, with the grain-free issue, it just keeps rearing its ugly head.
Yeah.
And it's very confusing for pet parents. I cannot tell you the amount of emails we answer on this subject all the time. We try to offer both options. So Canine Health has 6 organic grains because some dogs do well with grains. And as far as digestive issues, Canine Health is probably our #1 seller because dogs with digestive issues do incredibly well with it. Some dogs do not do well with grains. So we offer vegetable and paradigm and raw Vibrance. Dogs are like people. They're individuals.
Yeah. Some people can do spicy food, some can't.
And some do well on a keto diet, and some people should be vegetarians. So it really depends. All of our DNA is different, and it's the same for the canine world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And let's see. Yeah. Heather used to add garlic back in the 80s in the liver. Yeah. Did you ever show your dogs?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
Dog show thing.
No.
Never got into it. Liver is the bait of choice for most show dog handlers. And you would bake it and then boil it. And yeah, it had garlic in it so that it covered up the liver smell. And it was gross. It was really gross. It was really gross.
So if you're looking for a really great treat, any one of our new treats, including, I'm telling you, these chicken hearts, my dog would take my hand off for these. He just loves them. Very, very good for training.
Yeah, definitely, and healthy. I haven't looked at any. Are they pocket friendly?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a whole heart, so they're kind of big. But
So
I have a big dog. I mean, for a smaller dog, you'd probably want to break it up. But they're freeze dried, so they break up very
break
easily.
up nicely.
Yeah.
Pat has a quick question about the veggie mix. So she's batching for her dogs.
Mm-hmm. Which is a great idea. You certainly can rehydrate it, and you can freeze it, which we do all the time if we're traveling and we leave our dog with a dog sitter. We make it up in individual meals and freeze it, and that's perfectly fine. The only thing you don't want to freeze is the oil. So you have to ask your dog sitter to add the oil after it's been defrosted. But you can freeze the meat and you can freeze the veggies, and actually any one of our base mixes can be frozen.
Excellent. Yeah, I think when you travel with dogs, you really appreciate this sort of product that lets you stay within, even if you're a DIY feeder, stay within your arena, if you will, but yet be able to travel.
And we also have now the complete meals like Oracle, our allergy food, our healthy weight food. Those all have the meat already in them. So they're incredibly travel friendly. Just add water.
Yep.
And we have lots of people who travel with their dogs that find these to be very, very helpful. And just a little news, which I haven't even told anybody. I don't know that we'll even talk about it. We are coming out with an entire line of freeze-dried complete foods within the next few. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. How is it being I'm going to call them an alternative form of food?